What's up, y'all? We just finished another interview. We know we've been doing a couple interviews recently. We hope you've been enjoying them as much as we've been enjoying them. Today, we met and discussed and talked to Zach Bigley, the Frisco RoughRiders broadcaster. Such a great guy. It was just great learning from him and talking to him and hearing his point of view about baseball. I thought it was very interesting about how he talked about the Frisco RoughRiders, and then he mentioned some fun things about McKinney ISD football. If y'all aren't familiar with it, football in Texas is crazy, and McKinney just got a 69.9 million. When I say just, it's 3 or 4 years old. But Austin, what'd you feel about this interview?
Yeah, I loved it. It was interesting, the whole rabbit hole about him at the University of Oregon calling games in the Final Four for a great basketball team in 2017, to his journey to Southern California, to Myrtle Beach, to Frisco, and how he looked after a guy named Dave Niehaus, who kind of inspired him to be a broadcaster today. So it's a great interview, and I definitely think you should listen to it.
Yeah, and he dropped. I won't drop the name, but he dropped a name of a new Maverick. So make sure you keep an eye on that. And talk to you soon. Welcome back. Today we'll be interviewing Zach Bigley, the manager of media development and broadcaster for the Frisco RoughRiders, the Double A affiliate for the Texas Rangers. Bigley majored in journalism and minored in history at the University of Oregon. When he is not broadcasting baseball, Bigley broadcasts football and basketball games for McKinney ISD. Thank you again, Zach, for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, Kevin, no problem. Kevin and Austin, really a pleasure to join you guys, and hope you guys are staying somewhat cool in this heat wave we're going through right now.
We're trying. At least I am. I don't know how you are, Austin.
I'm trying. It's hard sometimes, but gotta survive.
So, I read that you played baseball in high school. What was your favorite part of playing baseball?
My favorite part of playing baseball was the game. I mean, I just love the game. I've always loved the game. I was brought up as a Mariners and Cleveland Indians fan. My dad was a Cleveland guy growing up, and I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. So, baseball has just been my favorite ever since then. And growing up playing it every single day. I mean, it was the only sport I played in high school, and it was where I had a lot of my friends, and it was an opportunity to be a part of something, and that was the best part. But the actual game itself, I mean, I love so much, and unfortunately, I wasn't good enough to play at the next level, so I had to go the broadcasting route. But it was still just a blast to be a part of, and I do miss playing.
And then, was there a favorite player that you tried to emulate while you played?
I grew up as a Mariners fan, so Franklin Gutierrez actually was a guy who I watched when I was in high school as a defender. He was really smooth out there, and he was one of my favorite guys to watch. He was with the Indians and then with the Mariners. And funny enough, my first year in minor league baseball, I was working for the Rancho Cucamonga Quakes in 2017, and Franklin Gutierrez was playing with the Dodgers, and he rehabbed with us, so I got to meet him, which was really cool. Um, and then so it was really Franklin Gutierrez and then Ichiro, of course, growing up. I didn't necessarily emulate him because no one can really emulate Ichiro, but I loved watching him, and he was just a wizard with the bat, so it was so much fun.
That's so cool about Gutierrez that you were able to meet him.
Yeah, it was so much fun, and I was super lucky with the Dodgers, especially in that one year where we had a ton of amazing rehabbers. Justin Turner, Adrian Gonzalez, Kenta Maeda, which was crazy because all the Japanese media are nuts and they're so fun. And it was just really fun to be a part of that. And one of my favorite stories actually from that year was Raul Ibanez was another guy who I grew up watching and grew up loving as a Mariners fan, and he was a roving instructor for the Dodgers. And I was down in the dugout pregame during batting practice, getting ready to interview one of our guys, and I had a name tag on, and uh, Ibanez was coming into the dugout, and I just introduced myself. I was like, "Hey, Raul, like my name's Zach. I'm the broadcaster. Just wanted to introduce myself." And he was like, "Yeah, Zach Bigley, like really nice to meet you." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like how do you know me?" And I forgot I had a name tag on. But it was really funny, and he was a super nice guy. And that's the big thing is a lot of these guys are really great to work with, and that's one of the things that stands out in the minor leagues, especially where you get exposed to all these guys young as players, and then post career with a lot of the roving coaches and that kind of thing. Just a blast to be a part of, and a blast to work with these guys.
I've also seen you mention that when you're younger, you listened to Dave Niehaus, who was the Seattle broadcaster beforehand. What have you tried to imitate from him that you saw when you were listening to him before?
I think that ultimately I try to be myself on the air, but I think you got to take Dave Niehaus's energy. I don't know if you guys have ever heard Dave, but didn't matter whether it was 1995 and the Mariners were beating the Yankees to go to the American League Championship Series, or if it was 2007 and they were 50 games under 500 and playing on a Tuesday. He always had incredible energy and always had fun on the broadcast. And I think that that's something that's super important, especially in a long minor league season. That you have to realize that there may be somebody tuning in who's tuning in for the first time, or who is still very invested in a game that you might be on the last game of a long stretch and you're looking forward to something else. But bringing that energy is something that I always admired in both Dave and Rick Riz, who's the broadcaster, the lead guy on radio for the Mariners. And I think that's super important, and that's something I've always loved. And also, you could always hear Dave Niehaus smile in his calls, and that's something that I think is super important in broadcasting, is making sure that you're portraying your personality over the air through your voice, and that's definitely something I've taken from him.
So you majored in journalism and attended the University of Oregon. Why did you choose Oregon?
Oregon was the only school I applied to. Oregon was the school that I knew I was going to go to. I grew up in Eugene, 4 miles away from campus, and actually I went to elementary school, middle school, high school, and college, all within a 1 mile radius of each other, and then immediately moved all over the country in minor league baseball. So it's kind of funny, but I loved Oregon. I think that when I was in my senior year of college or senior year of high school, I was trying to figure out where I was going to go to college. And I was looking at Oregon and I was saying, if I want to be a broadcaster, I'd never done anything on air. It was just kind of a dream. It was something that I wanted to do. And you won't find a much better sports culture in college than Oregon. You have top of the level athletics. You have an athletic department that cares about facilities. And you have a football program that's treated essentially like an NFL team from the media perspective. And getting that kind of exposure at a college level, there's nothing that you can ask for any better. And I lucked out where I didn't do any research at all on like student radio or anything like that. And it turned out to be student radio, and it turned out to be a really good program. And it turned out ultimately to be a place where I worked with some really awesome guys that propelled me to where I am today, because we all really cared about being the best. And that's something that I couldn't have planned for, but it just kind of worked out. And ultimately, it worked out for the best. So I'm really, really happy that I went to Oregon, and I'd never do it any differently.
What was one of your favorite moments from broadcasting at the university?
Man, there were some really good ones. So I did football, volleyball, and softball for Oregon specifically. And then we did local high school football and basketball as well. Um, And my first ever play-by-play was Marcus Mariota's final game at Oregon, which is insane. Um, and I can't bring myself to go back and listen to it. It's awful, but it's still a really cool thing to say. And then we had just some incredible teams while I was there. Oregon volleyball was one of my favorite teams that I got to work with. My senior year, going and traveling with them when they made the postseason, going to the University of Michigan and traveling with them there and calling postseason volleyball was super, super fun. This softball team was amazing every single year, and making making those relationships and calling those incredible games were really fun too. Um, with Oregon football, my senior year was when they didn't make a bowl game for the first time since 2004, I think. And so that wasn't, the most fun thing in the world, but I had the opportunity to travel all over the Pac-12 and see some really cool venues. University of Washington was an incredible venue, turned out to be an incredible game that year as well. University of Utah was crazy. Um, Stanford was a great game. They don't really pack the place like other places do in the Pac-12, but it's always funny looking around and finding students reading books in the stands at Stanford while the game's going on. But just incredible opportunities to call meaningful games and good games with incredible athletes that went on to play at the next level. Oregon basketball, we didn't broadcast their games, but we covered them. And after I graduated in 2017, I moved down to Southern California, and they happened to be in the Final Four in Phoenix. And so I had graduated a week earlier, and the radio station was like, hey, you're down there as one final hurrah. Do you want to go down and just cover the Final Four? So that was probably one of my favorite memories was being there in the Final Four at the time, University of Phoenix Stadium, home of the Cardinals. And watching a basketball game in a football stadium is incredible. It's a once in a lifetime experience. And if it hadn't been for Kennedy Meeks of UNC, we may be talking about a different thing, but still just an unforgettable experience. And those were some of my favorite memories.
They sound amazing as you're talking about them. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, I remember watching that game. That game was crazy.
Yeah, Tyler Dorsey hit a three that went off the back of the iron and then fell through. I think that made it a one possession game at that point. And then UNC or Oregon, UNC was shooting free throws and Kennedy Meeks blew through Jordan Bell and got the rebound to end the game essentially. And that was tough. That was really hard.
Yeah. So out of college, how were you introduced to the minor league baseball scene?
So I did student radio my sophomore year, was my first year doing student radio. And I happened to work with a guy named Ryan Roulard, who is still one of my best friends. And he was doing summer collegiate baseball at the time. And so I was like, I want to figure out my way to get into baseball. So he helped me get a job in the West Coast League, which was summer collegiate baseball. And I worked with the Walla Walla Sweets for 2 years while I was in college. And from there, I had, the experience, the tape, whatever, where I felt comfortable enough where I could go into the minors. And I went to the winter meetings my senior year and interviewed for a few positions and ended up getting offered one position, and I took it, and it was in Southern California with Rancho Cucamonga. And that was an incredible experience where it was just a great entry-level job where I called a ton of games. I mean, it was a 140-game season. I think I called 120 some odd games. And it was, insane. You look at that roster, and I don't know if you guys are big baseball fans, but Walker Buehler started on that team. And we ended up having, I think, 19 big leaguers come through that team. A lot of whom, are with the Dodgers. Will Smith, the catcher, and then, Mitch White, Caleb Ferguson, a ton of really good pitchers who are now, playing on one of the best teams in baseball in the Dodgers. So really, really fun. And then from there, I, wanted to make sure I perpetuated my ability to keep going in minor league baseball. And I reached out to a guy named Scott Kornberg, who was the broadcaster for Myrtle Beach, Cubs affiliate, when I was in college. And it turns out that I was graduating too late for his position. So after 2017 with the Dodgers affiliate, I reached back out and I was like, hey, I'm still really interested in being your assistant. And it worked out. So I ended up going to Myrtle Beach for 2018. And then he left for another position. And so I took over the lead role in 2019. And then my boss in college, my good friend Ryan Roulard, was here in Frisco. And he ended up leaving. And Myrtle Beach and Frisco have the same ownership group. So I knew the leadership here in Frisco, and I moved out here to take over Ryan's high school football and basketball gig. And I was like, I'm just going to hope that I get the Frisco job. And I ended up getting it. So it was really, really cool. This is, in my opinion, the Frisco RoughRiders are the best job in minor league baseball with this market, and with Victor Rojas, who is our president and general manager, who was the broadcaster for the Angels for 11 years. It really just doesn't get much better in terms of all the wonderful things we're afforded here in Frisco, and uh, being in Dallas, as a young 20 something. So it's really really fun.
That's amazing about Ryan Roulard. I We read about how he left, and then how you came in, and then that's crazy about Walker Bueller. I just remember Walker Bueller and the Texas Rangers, the what if story about they were trying to get him in the Darvish trade, but Frisco RoughRiders are amazing. And then what is it? How do you like the stadium? I know about the lazy river.
Yeah, it's the most unique feature you'll find in the minors, that's for sure. Riders Field is one of, if not the best AA park in the minors, I think. We're here right now in Springfield, Missouri at Hammonds Field, which is also a beautiful park, but there's no lazy river. So, of course, it loses some points. I mean, it's really crazy. It's so much fun when you get all these people who come out in the area and come to the ballpark, and you bring them in for the first time, and you're like, oh, yeah, there's a lazy river out there in right field if you didn't know. So of course they want to go out there, and it's cool to have staff parties and all that stuff. And a lot of the guys during off days, a lot of the players will go out there and hang out in the lazy river. So it's such a cool feature. One of my favorite things is on Thursdays we have a thing called Blue Northern Hard Seltzer Rowdy at the River, and it's 21 and up out there. It gets crazy, and it's so much fun. So that's minor league baseball. That's kind of just do what you can to get people out, and the lazy river is a huge get people out there to the ballpark feature.
So I haven't seen many ballparks. Is there anything comparable to it that you've seen?
There's a few that have pools. I know Round Rock, the AAA affiliate of the Rangers, they have a pool in right field. Um, but I think one of the unique things about the lazy river is it's right on the fence, so you can be in the lazy river and just look down over the field. So I think that it is super unique. It's super fun, and it gets so dang hot in Texas that it's a really nice place to enjoy the game.
Then how did it feel to move to Texas and be announced or be recognized as the manager of media development and the broadcaster for the Rough Riders?
Man, it was crazy. So growing up in Oregon, I never thought I would live in Texas. I never thought I'd live in South Carolina or North Carolina. It's crazy where this job has taken me. I've been extremely fortunate to have worked the jobs that I've been allowed to work, and um, it was crazy to me that I would get the job, given some of the people I was up against to get the job here in Frisco. People who had a lot of years of experience on me were better than me, to be frank. But I really lucked out, and I'll never take that for granted. And um, it's just been really really cool. And what's interesting that a lot of people don't necessarily understand about this job is my favorite part is the broadcast side, and a lot of people look at it as a broadcasting job, but there's so much more that goes into it outside of that. So I handle the media relations side, so anything that has to do with the players from a media side. And we have Jack Leiter's the number one prospect in the Rangers organization, and the media frenzy has been crazy, especially in the beginning of the season with him. So that was part of my job as well, was to handle any and all media requests. I do writing for the team as well, so written content, handle the website, do a little social media as well, any on the baseball side of things on social, and then I also do most of the video editing for the team as well, produce content for in game, and yeah, I mean that's the job. It's a lot. It's something that when I was hired on, coming in off of the pandemic, because I was hired, lost my job, and then was rehired in 2021. Um, and it was one of those things where I was coming in and I was like, all right, it's going to be the media relations and broadcasting again. And then it was, hey, we don't have a video person, you're going to learn video. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm learning video. So that's just kind of the thing. You kind of fill the different parts that you can, and do whatever you can to be lucky enough to call minor league baseball. That's how I look at it, and be around these amazing guys with the team. You have a wonderful group of guys this year, great coaching staff, and a really great front office as well. And that's what it's all about. Is you're all in this grind together. It's a long season, and it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of hours, but it's the best job in the world. Sometimes you need to be reminded of that, and that's certainly what I try to do.
That does sound like a lot, all the responsibilities, but you said you learned video editing when you were hired?
Yeah, so I'd done, a little bit of work on Premiere, Adobe Premiere when I was in college, and then, literally just the basics, enough to slap a couple clips together and, call it an edit. And then when I was hired on, I kind of self-taught myself Premiere and After Effects through tutorials and trial and error and all this stuff, and enough to where I feel pretty confident on it to put stuff together. Um, After Effects is the bear. I don't know if you guys have ever used After Effects, but it's insane to do motion graphics and to put together a lot of stuff. So it's definitely really fun, and that's took up a lot of my off season. Was continuing to get better at that, but that's definitely something that's been one of the biggest learning curves for me in this job.
You also mentioned the pandemic. How did you stay sharp broadcasting over the long pandemic?
Man, that's a great question. The pandemic was tough. So I moved down here in 2019, got the job. I was with the RoughRiders for 3 months, and actually, I was so everything got shut down on a Monday, and I was supposed to leave for spring training the following Sunday, um, and everything got blown up. So I was working 2 months about in at home, and then got laid off. And like a lot of people, I went on unemployment, and that really helped me out. And ended up working at Dick's Sporting Goods and to pay the bills. And yeah, I was lucky where in Texas things weren't necessarily, as shut down as other states. So we played high school football still, and so that was still good to call high school football in 2020, call high school basketball in 2021 in the following year. And then we came back in minor league baseball in 2021. So luckily, it was just like a 5 month hiatus for me broadcasting. Um, but still, it was really tough, and it was the first time I wasn't calling baseball since 2013. So it was really weird not to have baseball over the summer, and um, it was something that I wasn't alone on. And I think that's something I had to remind myself is, this is tough, but it's not like everyone else out there is getting ahead of you. This is something that everyone's dealing with. And so that was something I had to remind myself of.
That's um, that's good that you could still. It wasn't super long, broadcasting wise, just in general. Um, but what are the differences in calling high school sports, whether it be basketball or football, and minor league baseball?
I think the biggest difference is, well, I think there are a lot of differences, but the biggest difference for me is with minor league baseball, I work for the team and I know these guys, and it's an everyday thing. And so, of course, you want to prep for every broadcast and you want to make sure you go in knowing everything about everybody. But it's to the point where, especially at this juncture in the season where we're at the end of July, if I just walked straight into the booth and put the headset on, I could call, a full 9 innings because I know these guys like the back of my hand, and I can talk about stuff that's going on with them and that sort of thing. Whereas with high school football and basketball, I don't have that access necessarily, where I'm working with these guys and I'm, have relationships with them. And on top of that, there isn't as much information to research and to, uh, pull from the internet. Where with minor league baseball, there are tons of stories on a lot of these guys. So I think that's a really tough thing. And part of my job doing football is there's a long pregame show where it encompasses multiple interviews with coaches and players. So you got to use those interviews to your advantage to make sure you do your research and really know what's going on in the game before things come about. And then, in addition to that, baseball, football, and basketball are all insanely different to call from a fundamental level. Um, Baseball, it's a lot of time to kill, and it's a lot of you're driving the broadcast rather than the game is driving the broadcast. Whereas in football and basketball, the pace of the game really dictates how you call the game. So, for example, in football, I have a color guy, and he does a wonderful job. He was a coach at the high school, and he knows everything about everything. And so a lot of my job with football is almost directing traffic, where I'm the play-by-play guy. I'm the guy who says what's going on with the play, and then I get out of there and he fills. And so it's really different in terms of kind of your form. And then on basketball, I'm solo as well. So it's a little bit more filling, but with basketball, it's such a quick game going back and forth and everything, where you want to know everybody and you want to know their backstories and all that stuff, but it is so much more game focused than baseball. And so that's really an adjustment for sure when you're going from baseball to basketball to football. But they all have their ups and downs and their things that I love for sure.
Then for McKinney football, um, was your first year broadcasting the first year they were in that new stadium?
It was not. It was not. I came there, I think, 2 years after it was built. But man, it is beautiful. McKinney ISD Stadium is it's massive. I mean, it's home to the D2 National Championship, so it holds a ton of people, and it is a gorgeous facility. And I came from a high school in Oregon where we were the second biggest high school in the city at 1,500, and the smallest of the three high schools that I call for in the McKinney Independent School District is around 2,800 to 3,000. That's the smallest out of the three. So it's wild. It's a completely different world. My high school football field was a turf field with bleachers on one side, and this is a massive arena palace. It's gorgeous. So it's so crazy. High school football is everything it's built up to be.
Yeah, it definitely is. So I was able to go to that stadium, and it was just crazy. So I was curious how much of an adjustment was Texas high school football was for you.
Why'd you make it down to the stadium? Just curious.
So I was in the band. It was I'm not sure if we're still in the district or still in the. It was Jesuit Dallas.
Yeah, not in the same district anymore, but my first year, you guys were.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe I may have been in the same stadium, been at the stadium at the same time as you.
Okay.
I can't remember. A few years. My last year was 2 years ago.
Okay. Yeah. 2019 was my first year calling games. Emmett Smith's kid was the running back my first year.
Yes. Yeah. So I was. I think that was. I was there because that's when we went far in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and then actually 2 years ago, uh, Jesuit took down McKinney in basketball in the playoffs, and I called that game as well.
Was that? I know. I was doing like sports information. I was helping the sports information director. So I don't know. Was that the year? Was that like your second year or?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if I was there, but that basketball team was awesome.
Yeah, it was like 3-pointers galore. It was yeah, that was a crazy game.
Yeah. So I bet that was a joy to call with all that.
Yeah, it was super fun. And then McKinney actually last year made it all the way to the state championship game down in San Antonio, and lost to an absolutely stacked Duncanville team. But they beat Austin Westlake in the semifinals, and that was it was just an incredible game. It went to overtime, and then Alexander Mekwe, who's at Texas now, stole the ball and had a buzzer beating dunk to send McKinney to the state final. So it was crazy. It was super fun.
Wow. That were you able to travel to San Antonio?
Yeah. Actually, I was lucky enough to do it kind of 2 years in a row. So I did. This year I went with McKinney boys, and then 2 years ago, actually like literally right before things shut down in 2020, I went down to San Antonio with McKinney girls, who made it to the state semis as well. So it was super fun.
That sounds amazing, and we appreciate you taking your time to talk with us, and we wish the RoughRiders a bunch of luck. I know the Rangers just signed Kumar Rocker. I heard rumors. I'm not asking, but maybe he comes up, and then that should be fun broadcasting.
Hey, Kevin, you know as much as I do. I'm hoping he gets here as well.
Yeah, I didn't mean to put you in a bad spot.
No, all good. All good. Kevin, Austin, thanks so much. Pleasure talking to you, and I wish you the best of luck with this.
Thank you.
Thank you.